Welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And this week, we're doing things a little bit differently. We're not so much talking about a specific movie as much as a genre, in a way, of movies at this point. Like, it is at this point a genre. We are talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole and how it has handled death and theoretically will continue to handle death. We've got some conjecture coming up.
If you're one of those people who's just primed and ready for Infinity War, want to hear any sort of speculation that will be irrelevant in like 2 days, then this is the end of this podcast is for you.
Oh, I think it won't even be 2 days. Like, the day this comes out, I think Infinity War releases like 6 hours later. So, like, pure day of speculation. So, you know, we're gonna hit that SEO nice and right. But yeah, we're going to be pretty much talking about past Marvel movies for a while, and then lead right into our speculation for Infinity War and beyond. And we both kind of have I don't want to call it tepid relationship with the MCU. I think that there are a lot of movies that we really enjoy, a lot of parts of movies that we really enjoy, but I also think that we've seen a lot of them.
Yes, if you were here for our Eraserhead episode last week, I failed in my mission to watch Thor Ragnarok in preparation for this. Life just kind of got in the way. But other than that, I have indeed seen every other MCU movie. And, you know, I would describe my relationship with the MCU as more... I would call it tepid at this point, but it's been pretty tumultuous kind of as it's gone on, because... I used to be really, really, really into these movies for a period from like early phase 2, like end of like Avengers 1, Iron Man 3, like I was super into them. And then as time went on, there were a few more hits. There were a few more like fun, exciting movies. I liked Guardians 1. I liked I'm like one of the 3 people on the planet who liked Age of Ultron, and just a few movies here and there. But I think my qualms with the MCU has less to do with the MCU itself, although at this point the movies have gotten pretty homogenized and the formula has started bringing down movies that have the potential to transcend the formula, to go beyond it. But more the fact that every film feels like it's trying to be an MCU movie now.
Wait. Are you saying that when they tried to do a dark universe, they were looking to imitate the MCU?
Does anyone even remember the Dark Universe still? Did that just get purged from everybody, like, the second The Mummy came out and completely shit its pants?
If anyone remembers it, it's only because they're still following Lindsay Ellis, because she is the only person who talks about it still.
It's great that people will talk about the Dark Universe shirt that she has on Twitter, and she has reported that it's like a Redbubble shirt that's going to fade with time. So soon, not even she will remember the Dark Universe once the shirt has completely faded, and then there will be no evidence of its existence left.
Oh man, what a sad metaphor for time.
But yeah, so I think even just beyond the more, like, the Dark Universe and, you know, even the DC extended universe are pretty obvious examples of people, you know, copying the formula. But I think even just what I'd call the Marvel tone has started, certainly within Disney's own properties like Star Wars and a bunch of other movies, that kind of specific brand of like Joss Whedon-y humor that really got set up in like Avengers 1. You know, that was kind of the big mega hit. Like, all the other movies were successful, but that was a huge like cultural event. And it feels like every movie since then every popcorn movie at least wants to have that same sense of humor, wants to have that same sort of conflict within the MCU and beyond it, and has produced mixed results, I would say.
I mean, you got to chase that Marvel money, and like that is what every blockbuster is doing nowadays. Like they're looking, like obviously, just from the extended universes that multiple studios have tried to put together on the fly, which terrible idea. But barring that, like it is definitely become a trend just because it is so overwhelmingly successful and so prevalent within the pop culture. And like I would argue at this point it's basically transcended pop culture and has just become culture of the past decade. It is just everywhere. You cannot look anywhere without seeing something related to superheroes or Marvel specifically. I think I'm pretty sure I mentioned this before, but I think we have 6 Marvel movies coming out this year alone, or maybe 5 Marvel and 1 DC. The point, it doesn't matter. The point is that we are looking at basically a superhero movie every other month this year. It's so prevalent just everywhere, and it makes sense that people are going to start to try and ape it a little bit and start to take from what they built. And the unfortunate part with that is, I guarantee this has been said before, but like my thing is, a guy I follow on Twitter, Ed Orman, was talking about like people who follow trends on Twitch. So everybody started playing Fortnite, so all of a sudden Fortnite is like the most streamed game on Twitch, and the bottom 9/10 are never going to see anything from that because they're playing the same game as everyone else. And so like that's really applicable to the Marvel universe as well, is like a lot of these movies looking directly at you, the Mummy, are looking to be the Marvel universe and set everything up once again, but they are following what they think is the trend, but missing like why it was so successful in the first place, and that it was new, it was different, it was something that nobody had done before. And like also Marvel took time to set it up. They didn't just be like, here's a Mummy movie, here's an extended universe around it, go nuts guys.
They took time to set it up, and they took time to make good movies. Like I remember when I saw Avengers 1, like the MCU gets a lot of shit that I think these criticisms are a little more valid as time has gone on. That they're sort of, if you don't follow the lore, you're not like too deep into like the meta narrative, that you're gonna get lost and it's gonna be confusing. But like Phase 1, that was definitely not true. I'd only seen like 1 or 2 of the Phase 1 movies by the time I went to Avengers, and Avengers 1, like, people give that movie crap for taking time to, like, reintroduce the characters, but what they did by doing that was make it so someone who had not seen, like, Thor could still follow what was and appreciate what was going on. Like, that's why it ended up being such a hit, is that it just was a good, like, popcorn movie. Whereas, I mean, you compare that, I mean, we can talk about the laughable, completely hopeless state of the Dark Universe, but maybe the more appropriate point of comparison is of course Justice League, which tried to do literally the exact same thing as the Avengers and just failed in every single way.
And we actually did talk about all this for the entire month of November, so if you want to catch up on what we said there, that's a total backlog for you. That's probably worth digging into. Just I thought it was a good set.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason that we've done a couple episodes, more than a couple, about this stuff now. Like, our very first, our pilot, I think, was Civil War. And if you have listened to that episode, like, some of what we're saying here is probably going to be somewhat familiar. So, Civil War gave me... my experience watching Civil War, I had a sense of deja vu when I went to see Black Panther.
Well, let me cut you really quick here, because I think we are about to start actually getting into it.
Oh, sure.
And I will say, like, we can't really say spoilers for most of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't know. This is going to be a pretty freeform conversation, so I can't give you specific movies. But at the same time, I don't think we're really going to ruin anything for anyone.
Well, I guess the way I kind of figured is that anyone who cares has probably already seen these movies that we're talking about, but just in case, like, I mean, definitely I'm going to be loose with the spoilers on, like, Phase 1 and 2, but if you care, if you still are, like, one of the few people who haven't seen Black Panther yet and you don't want to be spoiled, then maybe go do that.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Black Panther yet, that's one that I actually think you should probably correct, like, quickly. That's a good movie. Like, that's actually a worthwhile movie.
Yes, that is a good movie, and I think it's a good jumping off point because we didn't due to just like scheduling like chaos. We didn't end up getting around to doing an episode of Black Panther, which is a shame because I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in that movie. And a lot of it is pretty bold for a Marvel movie. Like, it's really not afraid to kind of dig into the political angle that I think stuff like Winter Soldier and Civil War kind of chickened out of. Like, Killmonger is such a well-realized villain, like, grounded in, like, you know, kind of...
He's a villain. He has characterization is really what it boils down to.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Does anybody remember Dormammu from Doctor Strange? I mean, props where props is due. That was one of the more interesting end fights of the Marvel Universe because it was actually like a use your wits type of thing after the punching had finished.
Yeah.
But Dormammu was literally... He's like gas cloud number 3 behind Galactus and Parallax. So
it's actually funny that you bring up Dormammu in Doctor Strange because I totally forgot Doctor Strange even existed while like taking stock of the Phase 3 movies.
Everyone did. That one, Doctor Strange, was not a great movie.
No, and I mean the thing is that it wasn't terrible either. It was just like formulaic. It was
utterly
just
forgettable.
Yeah, like with time. Like, I remember being in the theater and, like, enjoying myself well enough, but, like, it's something, like, I feel like my mind's been wiped. I can barely tell you a thing about it aside from that ending, which was, like, a kind of a clever little twist. So, Doctor Strange aside, because it's just completely unremarkable, but I think with Black Panther is that what we were seeing more clearly than ever before, because I could point to a few Marvel movies where this was the case. And, you know, we talk about this at length in the Civil War episode about how the constructs of the Marvel machine were maybe holding it back creatively, or there were some story beats that, you know, they could not go down. And in Black Panther, that wasn't as much of a problem, but it's still... You still, like, watching it, just get the sense that it would be a lot more effective, like, just as its own film. Like, and not... Both within, like, the fiction and with, as far as, like, the tone goes. Like, so in Black Panther, I found, you know, what was really interesting was, like, Killmonger and T'Challa, like, making these kind of, like, kingly decisions and this central moral dilemma of, like, protecting your own people and, like, putting yourself at risk to help the world, like, you know, that stuff was all good. But then when it came time to do, especially that last fight, I mean, really the third act in general, like, my eyes just completely glazed over. And, like, right before, I was so engaged with, like, the character drama and stuff that was happening. And then
you want to see people fight with laser shields for the 6th time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Oh my god. Well, the absolute worst was how a significant amount of time was dedicated to Martin Freeman piloting that stupid drone. And there was, like, the threat of, like, them finding him and blowing him up. But, like, I didn't care at all if Martin Freeman got blown up. He was an annoying character.
I forgot that Martin Freeman was in that, and I saw that, like, a month and a half ago.
No, I mean, see, exactly. I mean, it's, like, are we really supposed to care about this? Also, like, really weird that this, that like the CIA agent who like makes a point of explaining how like Killmonger learned his like tactics through like his time in like the American like imperialist regime. Like the fact that he ends up being such a hero, it's a strange choice.
Well, we can't have a movie without some sort of white savior in it.
Yeah, well, and that's like the one area where like there's a lot of places where Black Panther doesn't feel like compromise, but that is one place where you can kind of see, maybe Kevin Feige, however you say his name, like sliding up to Ryan Coogler and being like, hey, you're gonna put Martin Freeman in this film, just because we need more comic relief. And oh, he was the worst comic relief too. Like Martin Freeman, I love Martin Freeman, but he was just the worst part of that movie.
Yeah, you could pretty much just cut him out forever, and we're good.
I mean, you totally could, but I mean that's just like his character is that's a really good like encapsulation of like where I thought Black Panther could have been better, because it was good, but like if it had been given the freedom of that something like a Logan or a Dark Knight gets, or even like a Sam Raimi Spider-Man, like that kind of given that full directorial control outside of the machine, then maybe like it could have been even better. And that's again, like I think that Black Panther's a good emblem of how the tone problems and the stylistic homogeny and just all of these other things that make MCU kind of an exhausting prospect. It's a good example of how like these movies are overall like at minimum enjoyable, and at their best like almost close to being really great, but just the fact that they're so tied down to the aesthetic of the Marvel movies means that nothing ever really feels that dangerous. Like we know that in that final battle, like was there even a question of any character other than Martin Freeman being in danger? Like there was no tension.
Well, I mean, I think you're entirely right in that Martin Freeman is essentially endemic of the entire problem, and that every Marvel movie, like basically since the beginning, barring Captain America, the first Avenger, because I just watched that one, so fair warning, I'm going to be able to probably relate most of the stuff back to that in comparison, not any of the other Phase 1 stuff. But he, like, basically these comedic characters come in, and not only to lighten the tension, but also to be the tension. Because we all know that nobody's gonna die in these movies. Like, I think the exception kind of is Groot in the first Guardians, because they do kind of kill him, and it's actually confirmed that Baby Groot is technically a different Groot. But like the comic relief characters just exist to give tension that someone could die, and sometimes they do, but more often than not they walk away just fine. So they're trying to find tension, and they're trying to find this tension from death somewhere, but because we all know what's coming, because it's all been so homogenized, I don't think anyone's ever really concerned with a character dying anymore. Like, even in Phase 1, when Phil Coulson died, they just brought him back to life.
That one in particular is so wild, because that is like the central emotional crux of that movie, is like that's what finally brings them together as a team. So that's super crazy that they just went and gave him his own TV show.
And I mean, it actually works. It had like they left him dead, it could have presented tension going forward because someone had died.
You know who is allowed to die in these Marvel movies? The villains, because they die a lot, and
like heroes do.
Yeah. And I mean, well, it's a shame, because like if you think about Black Panther, the most interesting character is Killmonger. Like, great performance by Michael B. Jordan. Like, really, like, understandable motivation while also still working as sort of, like, an antagonist. Just great character. But, I mean, and maybe what is something that makes his character great is that he ends up dying in the final battle and gets, like, that moment of like, pathos, of, like, looking onto the sunset and, like, dying a free man. Like, that's a powerful image. So, I mean, I guess that's better than just, like, keeping him around for no reason.
Counterpoint, though, is, like, comic books are all about keeping those villains around. Like, that's what Joker is, and that's, you know, Red Skull. Every comic book villain is around for ages because each time they come in, they present a different situation or a different scenario or a different interpretation or anything like that. And I think that Killmonger works without dying. Like, the death scene in Black Panther worked for him, absolutely. But at the same time, I think being able to continually reintroduce him with learning or changing in some way would be really interesting, to actually see these villains change and grow and become characters like Killmonger. Like, anyone. I'm trying to think of even, like, a single villain that... Whiplash, wasn't he in, like, the second Iron Man?
Yeah, Mickey Rourke wants his bird.
Yeah, like, these people could have come back and done something different, you know? Like, they could have grown, they could have learned from their mistakes, something to make them more interesting. Or they could have even come back with a better, I don't know, backstory. Like, suddenly it's revealed that Iron Man killed their dog or something. I don't know.
It's interesting that you bring that up because, like, if we think about Killmonger aside, who is just clearly, I would argue just the best character in the whole mythos, but, like, you know, putting him aside as far as the other villains go, like, who is really the only one that gets any attention that is liked, really? And it's Loki. He's been featured in multiple movies. We see in the beginning, like, that, again, that's kind of the emotional core of the first Thor movie, is sort of the sibling rivalry, but even though, and he's not necessarily, like, super deep and compelling in all of his appearances, like, when how he's the big bad of Avengers 1, just the fact that, like, like, Thor the Dark World, like, that movie was total schlock, but I still remember all of Loki's scenes because there was some change and growth in that relationship. Like, Loki, and I didn't get the chance to catch up on Thor Ragnarok.
You need to catch up on Ragnarok.
Yeah, that's so I've heard. But Loki is sort of what makes Thor sort of an interesting character, at least in the first two movies.
Basically, the only reason he got 3 movies.
Yeah, totally. Well, that and, you know, Chris Hemsworth is, like, super hot.
I mean, that does help, but...
But yeah, so I think that, I guess, like, I'm of two minds on, like, this question of, do you keep Killmonger around? Because on one hand, like, that having him have this specific death scene that's powerful in its own right, in its own context, like, that feels like a decision that, like, a writer wanting to make a point would make. But then again, like, you can still potentially do more with that character.
I mean, so, like, even if we're not referring directly to Killmonger, like, I'm referring to more to, like, Whiplash is a great example for this. Because, like, Killmonger was a great character. I'm fine with him being a one-off type of thing. But bring back Whiplash, bring back the Mandarin, bring back something like that to make a statement, to make a change, to do something with them, you know? Like, there's something to be said for rivalries in comics. Like, Spider-Man and Doc Ock is iconic, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, to have one of these villains that have been beaten come back and not just Loki being Loki, I think would be really interesting.
And that, you know, that's the thing about their villains, is that, like, that's always the criticism that MCU movies get, is that, like, the villains are never interesting. But the thing is, like, they have improved. like the Phase 3 villains so far, at least in the movies that I've seen, Doctor Strange notwithstanding, are all like big improvements over the characters that we've seen before. Like Zemo from Civil War, like I liked how he was kind of understated, but I think he still worked.
I like Zemo a lot, actually. I think like his plan is stupid, but the motivation behind it I think is really good.
Yeah, and like I didn't like Guardians 2 at all, but even I could acknowledge that like Ego was a good like central driving force for what that movie was trying to accomplish, and obviously Killmonger. So they've improved on their villains, but I think that by having them still be one-offs, like we're never going to see Ego again. And so like it I think that's that. Ironically, for a project all about continuity, it's that lack of continuity, the fact that like they keep gutting their antagonists, like just as maybe they're starting to get interesting.
Well, see, here's the thing, is that because we have just put this out there into the world, Thanos is going to bring back all of them for some weird one-on-one showdown, right?
Well, let's talk about Thanos, because I think he's kind of the elephant in the room. Like, is there any way, they've been hinting at this character for like a decade now, is there any way that like they present him in the context of Infinity War that like makes him credible for like 10 years of build-up? I mean, I know like Sean, you're a big fan of the original like Infinity Gauntlet storyline.
You want me to talk about this? Because oh boy, can I talk about this.
So you would know better than me, but like it feels like just from what I've seen from the trailers and like kind of the reaction I'm seeing on Twitter is that it's not like, I know a little bit about Thanos, and it's not the like kind of weird, interesting, like operatic character that would be in those original comics, that he's just going to be like a Frieza. Like, I'm going to blow everything up. Oh, ho, ho, aren't I bad? Look at the big, stupid purple man and his golden wife beater.
I mean, yeah. So, for context of what Thanos is in the comics, and I should say, I understand the separation between comics and movies, but I think as someone who's, honest to God, the Infinity series, Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, and Infinity Crusade. Infinity Crusade's real fucking weird, but I need to go back and reread that at some point. They're probably my favorite series. So I remember when the first movies came out, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. What if eventually they get to fight Thanos and I get to see the Infinity Gauntlet? That would be so sick. I was like 13 when these came out, so hence the prepubescent voice. So I was really excited about it, and then like when they started to do it, I was more like, oh yeah, that's really cool. I'm so excited. 15, so I tried to deepen it a little bit. I don't know if it played, but so I did get, I was actually really excited about it. I'm like, all right, cool. This is super exciting. I'm really anxious to see what they end up doing with him. And it's been another 5, 10, I don't even remember. I don't care, which is a shame because Thanos is one of my all-time favorite villains, just period. Like the whole idea of Thanos within the comics is his namesake comes from Thanatos, which is essentially, I believe, a Freudian thing, which is to be self-destructive. And basically every plan he does comes undone through something that he subconsciously left himself open to do, which makes him a really interesting character. Like, and it's admittedly, like, he has conversations about this with people and everything behind it. And the whole reason he got the Infinity Stones was because he wanted to impress Lady Death. So it was like this whole weird macho thing going on. And I don't know why he wants these stones. What's the point? Like, what are we doing here? So,
because they at the beginning of in the first time we see him in Avengers 1, like they make the line about courting death, and like he smiles. So like that seems to imply that's still what they've got in mind. But we have no evidence, and for some, I don't know. I mean, I could be totally wrong. Like, come next week we're talking about Infinity War, but like I somehow doubt that they're going to actually make his motivation in this film that he wants to fuck death. Like.
I mean, I would be so down with it. So I don't know. I think that Thanos is going to be really tricky, and the fact that they actually have given Phase 3 some decent Marvel villains, I do think lends credence to the fact that Thanos might actually be a villain and not just another Dormammu or what the fuck were the villains in the first Avengers? They're not the Kree.
Loki, the Chitauri.
The Chitauri, right. I don't know why they didn't just use the Kree. But so I just think that it is entirely possible that they could make him an interesting and compelling villain, but the trailers don't necessarily speak to that for me because, like, even in the trailers, you can see a whole two armies just fighting, and that's not what Thanos is about in the comics. So I'm hesitant to give him credit without seeing it yet, because like the whole thing with the comics, and it was really cool, is you get everyone. In the comics, he gets the Infinity Gauntlet, snaps his fingers, and literally half the population of the universe just dies. They just disappear. And then the rest of the comic is the remaining people just trying to beat Thanos and failing miserably because the Infinity Gauntlet, which I guarantee it won't be as powerful as the comics, because the comics make it literally you can do anything with it. He is aware of all realities, all timelines, everything like that. There's no way you can do that in this movie. So I'm worried that it's not going to be as interesting as the comics, and I know that kind of puts me in the comic snob perspective, but look, I've been waiting for this for 12 years.
Well, and so here's the thing about an adaptation. Like, having not read the comics and not being able to speak to them, one thing that maybe you can just confirm or deny for me real quick before I go on to some like stupid tangent that isn't even true. So, would you say, because I've heard this about the original Infinity Gauntlet storyline, that Thanos is more the protagonist, almost?
I mean, entirely. Like, it is focused entirely on Thanos and his, quest for death and how it all works together and everything like that. The superheroes basically just keep throwing at him. He does end up being more the protagonist. Adam Warlock is kind of the antagonist. And it's interesting is the thing. And, like, Thanos is a character with desires and wishes and goals. And it's very much a character study of Thanos. And it won't be.
So yeah, here's where I'm coming at it then, as like someone who really just knows the movies and only has the like faintest familiarity with like secondhand knowledge of the comics. So Thanos, like it's been a big meme that like he doesn't actually do anything. Like, his only role in all of his appearances so far has been to lean forward menacingly.
He's leaning forward menacingly.
No, exactly. And so what we have, basically why I'm so skeptical about Infinity War, is that they keep hyping up how many characters, like how many heroes are going to be in it. But, like, only so many of those heroes are interesting, and only so many of them are going to have room to develop and not just be like red shirts. So maybe in that sense, like if they do take the Thanos as protagonist approach, like that could work out. Because
that would be like the biggest plot twist since Metal Gear Solid 2.
Yeah, and that would be I'd be super down for that, but like I mean, I guess we'll have to see, but that's not the vibe that I've been getting. So what that leaves as the alternate option is that in order to flesh out these nuances while still leaving room for like the heroes, that's where you have his appearances in like the other movies, like leading up to it a little bit. But all of his appearances so far have been just leaning forward menacingly, and even though like I forget that like he's Gamora and Nebula's like father, like adopted father, like that's a huge plot point, and like I just totally forget until that until that part in the trailer where she's talking about him. And I'm like, oh, right. Like, you know, here's this important character in the Guardians of the Galaxy universe, and Thanos is her father. Why doesn't that ever register with me? Well, because they haven't done anything with him in any of the films. I mean, in the post-credit scene, they literally put in, I don't remember what movie it was, but they put in that one of him, like, grabbing the gauntlet and saying, like, fine, I'll do it myself. They literally only put that in because people were memeing on Thanos, like, not doing anything too much, which strikes me as just a bit of a failure in the build-up of, like, the main villain of, like, what your 10 years of extended universing have all come together for.
He honestly kind of feels like almost if Abrams had done the first Avengers and kind of set up this mystery box for us and then kind of left everyone else to figure out what to do with them. Because it doesn't feel like anyone really wanted anything to do with them. Like, even Gunn, the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, mentions him offhandedly, which works for Gamora's character. Is like, you know, my father just fucking replaced body parts on, or Nebula just kept replacing body parts on me. And, like, yeah, that's effective and creepy. And, you know, if you were like, my father Thanos, the comic nerds like me would be like, oh, I know who that is. Oh, that's so exciting. But, like, when you've been hyping him for 10 years now, and that's the closest we've got to any character development on him, it doesn't feel like anything. It works in the Guardians universe as an aside, but I don't think beyond that anyone was really planning for him. Outside of just, he's coming.
They're two brothers. And old women are coming, and they're coming after these two brothers because they got a strong bond. No, totally. I mean, it just feels like they wanted to have this central looming threat, but nobody wanted to do the business of actually building him up. Like, even, I mean, wasn't one of the reasons that, like, Age of Ultron turned out the way it did is because the execs wanted more of the Infinity Stone stuff, and, like, Joss Whedon just wanted to tell his, like, stupid robot story, and that's why, like, we have Thor, like, taking the bath, and the whole movie is kind of, like, compromised in a lot of places. Like, pretty sure that's why it ended up the way it is, but, like, so without that plan and without any desire of the individual filmmakers to really have a build-up, then, I mean, what are you gonna do when he just shows up with, you know, generic army of bugs number like 73 and just starts, you know, what are you gonna do?
You know what you do? You release a standalone 3-episode Netflix series last year. Just give him some backstory. Give him some target, something. Not even necessarily even 3 episodes. Just be like, hey, we're releasing like an hour-long expose on Thanos. And just kind of him, you know, going about his daily life or something like that. Giving a little bit of backstory behind him. Or even like it's young Gamora and young Nebula. Something to introduce him to us other than the man who sits there. Menacingly.
Let's not forget Thanos' long-forgotten third child, young Sheldon. I don't know. I don't know.
I wasn't sure if that was a goof or not. Like, that's the problem. It's like there's been so many Thanos scenes. I'm like, did they use the kid actor from Young Sheldon in one of them at some point? I was genuinely unsure.
And isn't that the biggest problem of them all?
Oh my god. I was like, do I riff off of this, or do I...
or is he trying to tell me something here? Oh my god.
I guess what this all boils down to is Bazinga.
the big Bazinga. Thanos is gonna gather the last Infinity Stone in the movie, and it's just gonna cut to young Sheldon watching the film in his little shitty Kansas house. He's going to look at the camera and say Bazinga, and that'll be the end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
It just ends. It's all just over. The Big Bang Theory has consumed it. Oh no.
Oh
All right.
God.
All right, so back on track. Here's the ultimate question, and here's, I think, where we should start to give a little bit of conjecture.
Okay.
Do they have the teeth to kill someone in this movie?
Well, so if we're doing predictions, I'm thinking that at least one of the original squad of Avengers is going to die. Probably not Hulk. Hulk he's too much of like a side character,
and he's confirmed to be part of a space trilogy right now.
Perfect. So it's definitely not Hulk. I will, like, I've been saying pretty much in every movie that Tony's been in since like Age of Ultron that Tony's gonna die, but like I'm serious this time. Look at the poster. He's sitting in like a crucified pose, and no way Tony Stark comes out of this movie alive. Like they gotta stop paying Robert Downey Jr. eventually. Like now that they've established other popular characters, like they don't need to rely on Iron Man as much as they once did. I'm like, if I were a betting man, I'm going all in on them killing Tony Stark, if only because he's the obvious choice for a major character to off. And as far as other characters, a less sure bet, I would say there's a good chance that they also kill Cap. And the reason I'm less sure about this is that, so Cap and Tony are kind of the two most important, most beloved characters in the MCU at the moment. Like, that's sort of the reason Civil War was about them. They're kind of the most human. Like, Iron Man, you know, he's what made the MCU popular. Like, the success of his movies would allow the project to get off the ground. Like, and Cap, just over the years, through Chris Evans' portrayal and like Winter Soldier, just become increasingly more popular. So I think that it would make sense to have a moral center of the Marvel universe. I mean, I do have problems with that assertion that that's what Cap is, but like that is what we're supposed to think of Cap as, is like the moral center of the Marvel universe. I think it's very feasible that we see him sacrifice himself in some way. And then as far as the future, with Tony and potentially Cap out of the picture, what we might, I think we're going to start to see a shift, no matter what, to having Black Panther kind of be the new, like, I don't want to say figure, like the new face of the MCU, like how Captain Tony used to be, just because, you know, Black Panther made ridiculous amounts of money, super successful, and maybe they anticipated for that. Maybe they thought it was going to be a big hit. I mean, that is why that like Wakanda is featuring so heavily in the trailers. It seems like it's going to play a big part in Infinity War. The armies of Wakanda coming in as sort of the main force allied with the Avengers. That makes a lot of sense. But the fact that I'm sure it did even better business than they were expecting. So even if they don't kill Cap and like Cap's still around, to kind of have one of the old guard sticking around in order to like keep the old fans of like the first Phase 1 movies grounded. I think after like Ant-Man and the Wasp and like all these other like Phase 4 movies, like I don't know if Captain Marvel's wrapped yet or not, but like that was still shooting. I think we're gonna see a shift into making Black Panther kind of the new Iron Man, who like they'll push into a movie to give it more of that appeal, put him in a project that maybe seems a little less certain. Of course, like what could be more certain than an MCU film at this point? But I think that like pretty much no matter who makes it out of Infinity War, like Black Panther's going to become like one of the top dogs of like the MCU, I think.
So here's my take on this. And I think your end result of Black Panther becoming like the new top dog is spot on. I think that's absolutely going to be what happens going forward. I think I differ in who's going to die in this movie, but only kind of. So here's what I posit. Almost everyone dies in Infinity War. I'm going to say Cap dies, Iron Man dies, probably Star-Lord, Ant-Man, all those people die, get captured, something like that.
Ooh, this is spicy. I want to hear the rest of this.
So it's going to get spicier, and by spicier I mean it's going to be a hot take. I think what's going to end up happening then is after most of the major characters are captured, I think the people who might get out are going to be Spider-Man, Black Panther. I'm feeling Thor for some reason. I don't know why. And I think the guarantee, other than I think Spider-Man, Black Panther are guarantees, and I think Strange is going to get out. I think what's going to end up happening is the cliffhanger is going to be them leaving, because I hear there's a cliffhanger. I guess spoilers, but like there's a sequel. There's obviously a cliffhanger.
I mean, it was originally pitched as Infinity War Part 1 and 2. So
yeah. So that group is captured, like except for those X number of people who Strange like teleports out or something like that. They just end up getting away. So all the other people are dead, and they're trying to grieve with it. What ends up happening in the sequel is, because the Infinity Gauntlet is literally a god weapon, like literally you are a god. The only way that they can get it is to send Strange after it. And what ends up happening is Strange ends up being the only one who dies, even though he might not actually die, in that he gets the gauntlet, uses it to bring the people who died back, frees them, whatever ends up happening in that regard. Everyone is alive again. Strange, in an effort to protect the Infinity Gauntlet from falling into enemy hands ever again, goes into the Nether Realm or dies using it, or the thing backfires on him, something like that, and takes care of himself. So the magic issue is gone from the Marvel Universe, because Strange is kind of overpowered, but they're never really going to talk about that, because he's appeared in one other movie since his initial release, and they literally just kind of hand-waved him away. And it takes away the Infinity Gauntlet as well, leaving the other crew alive. Following that, seeing the success of the other team, Cap and Iron Man are going to step down, feeling like they've done what they can, leaving it onto the hands of the future children to take over and do what they can with the world, try and save it. And, they've done enough damage, they've done enough success, whatever. They move on. They show up occasionally, but for the most part, they're done and out of the picture.
Oh, no. Okay, all right, so first of all, I just want to say that, like, while you're explaining... Sorry, did I cut you off?
No, you're good.
But, because I was just going to make a statement. Like, I just wanted to make sure that, like, I got the full picture. But, like, first of all, it's sad that, like, while you were explaining that, like, I was trying to think about, like, the corporate logic behind, like, who might still be around and not. And, like, it's incredibly sad that that's figuring into... Like, it's just comment... Like, I was talking about this the other day, like, Avengers 1. Like, people used to ask all the time, like, why... at the time it would have been Andrew Garfield, like why his Spider-Man wasn't in the Avengers.
Hawkeye might die.
Oh, Hawkeye, I could see that.
Sorry, I think he might be he could be a permanent death. Sorry, go on.
I think Tony Stark is permanent. I think that with like just that poster and the fact that he is like, if you watch the trailers, he is suspiciously absent from that grand shot of like the Wakanda battle, but maybe they're trying to fake us out.
But you could also come back in the second one.
So that's the thing, is that like I'd assume that the reason that they backed off the like part 1 and part 2 plans was that they went for a more chicken shit ending for this. But if they do just bring them all back, then that's the ultimate have it both ways of like getting this big like shocking turn of like most people getting killed and then bringing everyone back to life. Oh, it's so bad and yet so plausible.
It's perfect. Like as you were talking, I'm like, this makes way too much sense just given the power of the Infinity Gauntlet. And like, here's the thing. That's how the Infinity Gauntlet comic ends as well. It's like everyone comes back to life because Adam Warlock takes it, brings everyone back to life. But it makes sense in that because it's not about them. You know, like they disappeared as a plot point. Returning them to life is part of the story because it's not about them. It's about Thanos and Adam Warlock to a secondary extent. So I could see it happening just because it's kind of a homage to the comic.
Oh no! And then truly there are no more stakes.
Well, see, that's the thing, is that actually could theoretically introduce stakes going forward, because if Strange takes the gauntlet and disappears, I mean, that's pretty much everything. But it does defeat the whole purpose of death in movies. Like, they've got one shot at that.
Yes. I mean, it's the same problem they had with reviving Superman so quick. This is dangerous ground. However, so two things. First of all, again, hate that I have to like bring so much like corporate nonsense into this. So what is the Spider-Man situation anyway? Like, isn't Sony going back to like making movies, or is he just like a fixture of the MCU now? Because I was thinking that if there are like rights problems, then like Spider-Man might be up for grabs here.
He's 16.
What?
He's 16.
Oh yeah, that's right. They cast him specifically to have him grow older. I remember.
Not even to have him grow older, but the character's 16.
Yeah. I guess that would be too spicy.
It's an MCU movie. Like,
yeah.
In another PG-13 movie, sure, A Quiet Place kills a kid immediately.
Yeah.
So, I think it's just because it's an MCU, the fact that he's 16, he's not getting killed.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that I hadn't even considered that angle. I was just thinking strictly from like, well, on the business side of the Spider-Man debacle, like Carpenter.
No, for sure, it makes sense on that regard. But
yeah, no, you're totally right. So yeah, probably no extended. Well, and then that's perfect because Tony's been Spider-Man's like daddy figure this whole time, so that gives him that finally gives him an Uncle Ben in this universe.
That's awful.
So the only qualm I have with your theory is that I'm not sure that they would do something to get Strange out of the picture so quickly. I didn't see Ragnarok, so I'm not sure if there was some.
He's in there for 5 minutes, and that's
only
it.
5 minutes. Okay, I don't know if he actually played a role in it, but
not really.
Yeah, so that leads me to believe even further that just coming from like the corporate money standpoint, I know that Doctor Strange is like nobody's favorite character right now, but Thor was kind of in a similar position. Like, he was definitely the kind of the weaker link of the Phase 1 heroes. But they went through some efforts through like his side characters in his world, like flesh him out, and now Thor is a lot more liked. I can't imagine.
Doctor Strange brought nothing to it, like literally nothing. Thor brought the fact that he's hot, and the fact that he has a devilish twin brother, a charismatically devilish twin brother. He's not a twin. Never mind.
And he was the like cosmic, like as a Phase 1, he was the only like cosmic like fantasy connection.
What is Strange bringing at this point?
So I don't disagree with that assessment, but I still think that the corporate overlords would be real reluctant to not try to do something with him first. I can see them trying to make Doctor Strange cool, even though Doctor Strange is never going to be cool.
I mean, I wouldn't exactly say never. Just give them to do what they did with every other property that they thought was gonna flop. Give them to a director who kind of has like an auteur style. Give them to an Edgar Wright. Give them to a Taika Waititi. Give them to somebody like that, and I'm sure they'll pump something good out. But also, it's Benedict Cumberbatch, and I don't know that anybody cared about his accent in that movie at all. So,
well. It's weird just how like I know for a while like Cumberbatch was sort of the
who
Benedict Eggs Benedict
okay.
Eggs Benedict was the the choice that everyone wanted to play Doctor Strange, like when they were first getting whispers of a movie back when he was kind of at the height of his popularity as sort of like the quirky nerd movie guy, but now it feels like nobody really cares about him anymore, so it feels like they hired Cumberbatch under the assumption that he would continue to have kind of that like Robert Downey Jr. star power, or if not the star power, then at least like the nerd appeal. But like the Cumberbatch fandom doesn't seem to really be a thing anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Bacon Cucumber really died out after Sherlock ended, honestly, or like kind of ended. I think it's still coming back, but like I heard the last episode, like the most recent season, was really not great. And I know that like the blowback against Sherlock has started, which, I mean, shocker, right? A blowback against something that gets immensely popular. Never heard of that before. But I don't know. I do think his time has just kind of passed. I think like he's a fine actor. I rather like him, but I just don't think that he is going to continue with his role in the MCU. Honestly, I don't think he's charismatic enough. I don't think he has enough going on in his movie to really make him worth it. And he feels like the perfect disposable character to get rid of the Infinity Gauntlet, because Adam Warlock has just been hinted at in Guardians 2, and Gunn has already said that he basically put him in there as like a, hey, look, for the nerds who are like, oh, it's Adam Warlock, and nobody has any intention of using him, which could be a lie, but I mean, it's Adam Warlock. That's like, I don't know, introducing Guardians of the Galaxy to the series all of a sudden, which, yeah, I guess that happened.
Well, so I don't think we should discount the possibility that they will either like invent or like take an existing Marvel character who like hasn't been in the universe until now and kind of like awkwardly introduce them in the middle of Infinity War, specifically for the purpose of having that character be the one getting rid of, like, taking the Infinity Gauntlet out of play.
Ooh. Maybe he can float down like Superman in Justice League at the end of Infinity War 1. Like, just kind of like miraculously float down like he's just there all of a sudden.
I honestly, that's what I'm thinking, because if you think about it, like, Vision kind of came out of nowhere, and hasn't done all that much of note. It seems like Vision. It kind of seems like Vision, in hindsight, now like only exists in the MCU movies. Just so, I mean, like, if Thanos is gonna get the stones, like, we know that Vision is at least gonna bite it temporarily. Maybe he'll probably come back with everyone else when everyone else comes back, like you say. But like it kind of feels like in hindsight, Vision only exists to die, which is weird.
Yeah, kinda, honestly. And I mean, like, I think a lot of people even pointed out when he was born, like, wait, that's an Infinity Stone? What are they doing with this now? What's happening? So he's just dead, right? He's just dead. Cool. All right, sure. So, I don't know. I guess that's what we got.
I guess that's our hot takes, our hot and spicy speculation. You can listen to our speculation, then go see Infinity War like an hour later and show how we are, I want to say how we're totally wrong, but I am now, like, afraid that, like, that's the long con that they're doing. They're just going to bring everyone back. Like, that, oh no. That's a darkly plausible, like, spicy take.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of, like, as I was saying, like, ooh, this feels way too plausible for what I'm getting at right now.
Oh, it's such the perfect, like, cynical balance of seemingly shocking, like seemingly ground shaking, but actually being totally safe and bringing everything back to the status quo. Like, oh no.
Well, if you feel the need to yell at me for this theory, call me a charlatan, and insult me for bringing down the good name of the MCU, and they would never pull something so cheap, please, you can find me at Sean_McKinda on Twitter. I also have a website, isortof.com. You can get to everything I do there. Twitch, I've got some really dumb YouTube videos up, which you probably shouldn't even go watch because they're really bad. But you can also get to my Twitter through there. So it's the easiest way to find everything I do, isortof.com. Go check it out.
And I am Jackson Keller. You can find me over on Twitter at JacksonJKeller, where, I mean, I guess some things happen sometimes. I retweet some pretty good content. If you want to know good people to follow, just follow me.
Jackson, you're a content aggregator. He's good.
the Metacritic of Twitter.
Oh no, that's gonna be a thing. You just willed that into existence. Way to go.
Yeah, forced memes. High five.
If you want to follow the podcast, we kind of just tweet about things that are coming up, things that we're doing. Occasionally we tweet out things like, hey, you should watch this before you listen to this week's episode, just to kind of give you some background. Go check that out at BADH_cast. As always, I'd like to thank Lords of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide Alternate Take off the album High Octane Low Expectations. Special thanks goes out to 25 Years Later Site.com. They are an incredible site with a great group of writers who cover basically everything coming out. Lots of cult TV, lots of cult movies. They are cool enough to host us on their site, so if you haven't checked them out, please do so. Go rate and review us on iTunes, tell some friends, all that good stuff. It helps us get our name out. Just pass the word of the Deathcast to the world. You won't sound like a weirdo for listening to it, I promise. Next week, we're going to be talking about Infinity War. Shocker, right? So get ready for that, I guess. Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go